It happened one day about noon, going toward my boat. I was exceedingly surprised with the print of a man's naked foot on the shore, which was very plain to be seen on the sand. I stood like one thunderstruck, or as if I had seen an apparition. I listened, I looked round me. I could hear nothing nor see anything. I went up to a rising ground to look farther. I went up to the shore and down the shore, but it was all one. I could see no other impression but that one. I went to it again to see if there was any more, and to observe if it might not be my fancy. But there was no room for that, for there was exactly the very print of a foot, toes, heel, and every part of a foot. How it came thither I knew not, nor could in the least imagine. When I came to my castle, for so I think I called it after this, I fled into it like one pursued. Whether I went over by the ladder, at first contrived, or went in the hole at the rock, which I called a door, I cannot remember, for never frighted hare fled to cover, or fox to earth, with more terror of mine than I to this retreat. I had no sleep that night. The farther I was from the occasion of my fright, the greater my apprehensions were, which is something contrary to the nature of such things, and especially to the usual practice of all creatures in fear. But I was so embarrassed with my own frightful ideas of the thing, that I formed nothing but dismal imaginations to myself, even though I was now a great way off it. Sometimes I fancied it must be the devil, and reason joined in with me upon this supposition. For how should any other thing in human shape come into that place? Where was the vessel that brought them? What marks were there of any other footsteps? And how was it possible a man should come there? But then to think that Satan should take human shape upon him in such a place, where there could be no manner of occasion for it, but to leave the print of his foot behind him, and that even for no purpose, too, for he could not be sure I should see it, this was an amazement the other way. I considered that the devil might have found out abundance of other ways to have terrified me, than this of the single print of a foot, that, as I lived quite on the other side of the island, he would never have been so simple as to leave a mark in a place where it was 10,000 to 1 whether I should even see it or not. And in the sand, too, which the first surge of the sea upon the high wind would have defaced entirely. All this seemed inconsistent with the thing itself, and with all notions we usually entertain of the subtlety of the devil. Thus my fear banished all my religious hope, all the former confidence in God, which was found upon such wonderful experience as I had of his goodness, now vanished, as if he had fed me my miracle hitherto, could not preserve by his power the provision which he had made for me by his goodness. How strange a checker-work of Providence is the life of a man, and by what secret differing springs are the affections hurried about, as differing circumstances present. Today we love what tomorrow we hate. Today we seek what tomorrow we shun. Today we desire what tomorrow we fear, nay, even tremble at the apprehensions of this. This was exemplified in me at the time in the most lively manner imaginable. For I, whose only affliction was that I seemed banished from human society, that I was alone, circumscribed by the boundless ocean, cut off from mankind, and condemned to what I called a silent life, that I was as one whom heaven thought not worthy to be numbered among the living, or to appear among the rest of his creatures, that to have seen one of my own species would have seemed to me a raising me from the death to life, and the greatest blessing that heaven itself, next to the supreme blessing of salvation, could bestow. I say that I should now tremble at the very apprehensions of seeing a man, and was ready to sink into the ground but at the shadow, or silent appearance, of a man's having set his foot on the island. Such is the uneven state of human life, and it afforded me a great many curious speculations afterward, when I had little recovered my first surprise. I considered that this was the station of life the indefinitely wise and good providence of God had determined for me, that as I could not foresee what the ends of divine wisdom might be in all this, so I was not to dispute his sovereignty, who, as I was his creature, had an undoubted right by creation to govern and dispose of me absolutely as he thought fit, and who, as I was a creature who had offended him, had likewise a judicial right to condemn me to what punishment he thought fit, and that it was my part to submit to bear his indignation, because I had sinned against him. Then I reflected that God, who was not only righteous, but omnipotent, as he had thought fit thus to punish and afflict me, so he was able to deliver me. That if he did not think fit to do it, it was my unquestioned duty to resign myself absolutely and entirely to his will. And, on the other hand, it was my duty to hope in him, pray to him, and quietly attend the dictates and directions of his daily providence. These thoughts took me up many hours, days, nay, I may say weeks and months, and one particular effect of my cogitations on this occasion I cannot omit. Namely, one morning early, lying in my bed, and filled with thoughts about my danger from the appearance of savages, I found it discomposed me very much, upon which those words of the Scripture came into my thoughts. Call upon me in the day of trouble, and I will deliver thee, and thou shalt glorify me. Upon this, rising cheerfully out of my bed, my heart was not only comforted, but I was guided and encouraged to pray earnestly to God for deliverance. When I had done praying, I took up my Bible and opened it to read. The first words that presented to me were, Wait on the Lord, and be of good cheer, and he shall strengthen thy heart. Wait, I say, on the Lord. It is impossible to express the comfort this gave me, and in return I thankfully laid down the book and was no more sad, at least not on that occasion. In the midst of these cogitations, apprehensions, and reflections, it came into my thoughts one day that all this might be a mere chimera of my own, and that this foot might be the print of my own foot when I came on shore from my boat. This cheered me up a little too, and I began to persuade myself it was all a delusion, that it was nothing else but my own foot, and why might not I come that way from the boat, as well I was going that way to the boat? Again I considered also I had trod where I had not, and that it at last was the only print of my foot. I had played the part of these fools who strive to make stories of spectres and apparitions, and then are themselves frighted at them more than anybody else. Now I began to take courage and to peep abroad again, for I had not stirred out my castle for 3 days and nights, so that I began to starve for provision. But I had little or nothing within doors, but some barley cakes and water. Then I knew that my goats wanted to be milked too, which usually was my evening diversion, and the poor creatures were in great pain and inconvenience for want of it. And, indeed, it almost spoiled some of them, and almost dried up their milk. Heartening myself, therefore, with the belief that this was nothing but the print of one of my own feet, and so I might be truly sad to start my own shadow, I began to go abroad again, and went to my country house to milk my flock, but to see with what fear I went forward, how often I looked behind me, how I was ready, every now and then, to lay down my basket and run for my life. It would have made any one have thought that I was haunted with an evil conscience, or that I had been lately most terribly frighted, and so indeed I had. However, as I went down thus 2 or 3 days, and having seen nothing, I began to be a little bolder, and to think there was really nothing in it but my own imagination. But I could not persuade myself fully of this till I should go down to the shore again and see the print of a foot, and measure it by my own, and see if there was any similitude or fitness, that I might be assured it was my own foot. But when I came to the place first, it appeared evidently to me that when I laid up my boat, I could not possibly be on shore anywhere thereabouts. Secondly, when I came to measure the mark with my own foot, I found my foot not so large by a great deal. Both these things filled my head with new imaginations, and gave me the vapors again to the highest degree, so that I shook with a cold like one in an ague. And I went home again, filled with the belief that some man or men had been on shore there, or, in short, that the island was inhabited, and I might be surprised before I was aware, and what course to take for my security I know not. Oh, what ridiculous resolutions men take when possessed with fear! It deprives them of the use of those means which reason offers for their relief. The first thing I proposed to myself was to throw down my enclosures and turn all my tame cattle wild into the woods, that the enemy might not find them, and then frequent the island in prospect of the same, or like the booty, when the simple thing of digging up my 2 cornfields that they might not find such grain in there, and still be prompted to frequent the island, then demolish my bower and tent, that they might not see any vestiges of my habitation, and be prompted to look farther in order to find out the persons inhabiting. These were the subject of the first night's cogitation. After I was come home again, while the apprehensions which had so overrun my mind were fresh upon me, and my head was full of vapours, as above. Thus, fear of danger in 10,000 times more terrifying than danger itself, when apparent to the eyes, and we find the burden of anxiety greater by much than the evil which we are anxious about, but, which was worse than all this, I had not that relief in this trouble, from the resignation I used to practice, that I hoped to have. I thought like Saul, who complained not only that the Philistines were upon him, but that God had forsaken him, for I did not now take due ways to compose my mind by crying to God in my distress, and resting upon his providence, as I had done before, for my defense and deliverance, which, if I had done, I had at least been more cheerfully supported under this new surprise, and perhaps carried through it with more resolution. This confusion of my thoughts kept me waking all night, but in the morning I fell asleep, and having by the amusement of my mind been, as it were, tired and my spirits exhausted, I slept very soundly, and awaked much better composed than I had ever been.